But yeah, it's also interesting that as we're continuing through Romans, I hit the topic for my sermon today was one another relationships. And this is old news to anyone who's been part of the church for a while and heard me preach a couple times. But for those of you who have not heard me preach before, I am not by nature a relationship person. People are difficult for me. And so the idea of preaching about one another relationships, it's like, I am learning about more of what I need to do because this is something I struggle with. At least certain aspects of it. I feel like once I'm connected with somebody, once I have a relationship, I do pretty well, but kind of making that happen, getting that started can be very difficult for me. And so, due to when and the environment that I was baptized in, my natural preference for one another relationship in the church would be something known as discipler. I think you may know the term that we use of discipling partner, but I was more familiar with discipler in where it was like a hill where you'd start on top with either a church leader or a ministry leader, and then it would go down to like they would be discipling Bible talk leaders, and they would be discipling people within their Bible talk and so forth. And that's what I kind of grew up spiritually in, and that's actually technically my comfort zone. I kind of just want to be told what to do, and then I will try to do it with the good of a heart as I can. And then even going further beyond that, like I would rather not disciple anyone, but if I have to, I want to just be able to tell them what to do. Would be my again, my preference would be not to tell anyone anything, but there is going to be a preference. I don't want them to be telling me anything back. I just want to be able to tell them, do this. But again, I just want to be told what to do. I don't want to talk back. I just want to be told what to do. And so that's what's easiest for me. That's what I would, I guess, prefer, because again, that's what I grew up with spiritually. But we're in a time where it's about one another relationships. We're in a time where it's a two-way street, which is the title of my lesson, where it goes both ways. And it's interesting about two-way streets. So we have a couple one-way bridges near us. And I don't know if this is news to anyone, but what you're supposed to do is if there's a couple cars, you go until there are no more cars. It's not one, and then the other direction goes, then the other direction goes, and the other direction goes. It's actually supposed to be the flow of traffic. But unfortunately, where we live, not enough people know that. So I am forced to do it the wrong so I don't cause an accident. And that messes with my brain a lot. I'm encouraging this behavior. But unfortunately, it's the safest move. But so two-way streets can be difficult to navigate sometimes, or two directions, especially when there is only one lane. And so these one another relationships aren't necessarily easy. Now, it's great when they are, and there are definitely some easy one another relationships. But they can be difficult, and there can be work. The scripture we're going into today is Romans chapter 16. And I'm not going to read the first part of it because it's just a whole lot of names. So you would be listening to me struggle with names, and then the Spanish-speaking ministry would possibly be listening to Doris struggle with some of these names. And so I am going to avoid as many of them as possible, or stick with easy ones, like Rufus. But Paul mentions at least 30 people. I don't trust my count. I came up with 33 a couple times, but I don't trust my count. So I'm just going to say over 30 people. Most of them by name, but Rufus, his sister, she doesn't get a name. Rufus is his sister, and Near is his sister. But for the most part, Paul names people. And what I didn't realize until doing this lesson is that at this point, Paul had not been to Rome. I just assumed all these letters he'd written to, he'd had some time there, and after he left, he wrote a letter saying, hey, I love and missed you guys. I did not realize he had not been to Rome. Now, he does know some of these people. I don't know every single one who he knows and who he doesn't, but he has met some of these people during all his travels through different cities, but he's never actually been to Rome at this point. But he writes them a letter, and he's able to name drop so many different people, which, Paul is impressive in a lot of ways, But you got to figure, Paul does all this traveling. He knows a lot of people. He meets so many people. And for him to be familiar with at least 30 plus, I mean, he may just have run out of room or ink or something. He might have known more, he most likely knew more people than who he named. But to know all those people, like Paul was intentional in building some of these relationships. And so one another relationships, they're personal and intentional. Because as I said, in verse 1 through 15, he doesn't just list names. I mean, some get grouped together. But he talks about kind of who they are and what they do. And not just, well, actually, I'm jumping ahead with that. But he knows who they are. He's interacted with them, and they're real. And whether it's the interaction with them specifically, or he's told about them and it kind of sticks in his memory, he remembers things about them, he has had interactions with members of the Church of Rome, and they're meaningful. And I think about what meaningful and deep could be, because especially in church, we can easily jump to deep and meaningful is talking about the Bible, talking about your prayer life, getting open. And these are all good things. I am not trying to say that those shouldn't be part of deep and meaningful conversations. But I think we can kind of cold shoulder other things that don't seem deep, things that can seem shallow, like people's interests, what they like to do, what they do for work. You know, sports can be an easy thing to fall back on. We are clearly a very, very football church. I don't know how we are with basketball and hockey and baseball, but we're definitely a football church. And so during football season, there are a lot of conversations about football, good and bad, complaining. Me and Hassan are having a bad time with our Jets and Saints. But I know. But it can be very easy to think like, oh, like that's not a way to build a relationship. Like that's not deep to talk about that. And there, you know, if that's all you can talk about, and if that's just a fallback, sure, then that you might need to take a different path. But for some people, that's something they care a lot about. That's something that's very important to them. And we're building these relationships. We want to be able to connect with people and find out what's important to them. And yeah, a sports team can seem silly, but as we witness any team that wins a Super Bowl, it means a lot to those fans. This is the second one they've won, and it's not like it was like, whatever. Like it's not like, we got the one already, this one doesn't matter. They still care. And so football can just be an escape. Like sports can just be an escape. Interest can just be an escape. But it does mean something to people. And to show an interest in that, sometimes even more importantly, if it doesn't matter to you. And I don't necessarily mean like fake an interest. Don't like ask a question like, oh, so tell me about your team. And just crash out and just tune out what they say. Listen to what they're saying. Hear what they're saying. And that'll mean something to people. That honestly, sometimes even more so if they know it's not something that interests you, but you're gonna sacrifice your time to care and listen and comprehend even what they're talking about. Deep doesn't just mean spiritual. Again, I want to highlight, we don't want to get away from spiritual because that's like, we are trying to grow closer to God. We are trying to bring people to God. But sometimes we need to have that connection. Sometimes it's even within church. It can be very easy to think of when we're building these relationships and starting out, we're starting out with people we're reaching out to, friends, neighbors, classmates, family. But not everyone within church knows everyone in church. There are plenty of people here that I have not had a conversation beyond good morning, how you doing, in this room. And so being able to build those relationships here, like, we need to be intentional with one another. We need to have that connection with people in this room. We are going through a fight, a specific fight, that no one outside of this room understands. Like there are plenty of people with our brother and sister churches that have similar fights, but no one is going through what the Lehigh Valley Church is going through, like the members of the Lehigh Valley Church. And so being able to connect with one another here, it can be very easy to have like, okay, we got our circle, I got my people, and that's it. But when we do that, we are missing out on what others can offer us. We're not going to be best friends with everyone in this room, but we can have a good conversation. We can have a good, beneficial one another relationship with everyone in this room. So don't shortchange yourself, don't shortchange others. Look to build those personal, intentional relationships. It's great when they just sort of happen. Those are my favorites, when I didn't have to put in any effort, they sort of happen. But there is something so rewarding about saying, like, I'm going to build a relationship. Maybe with a specific person, maybe with someone from a specific ministry, maybe just someone. There's something so rewarding about that knowing you went for it. You put in that work, you put in that effort, you gave it to God, and you built a relationship. One another relationships require love and service. You know, Paul doesn't talk about, outside of, he mentions, I think it's Phoebe as a deacon early on, but he doesn't really talk about titles in his letter when he mentions people's names. He doesn't say, like, Urbanus, chaos coordinator. He doesn't talk about, in joke, that's what Kurt calls me. He doesn't talk about Mary, the staff intern. Like, he doesn't mention their title. He mentions them, but not titles. He talks about what they have given and how they've served and what they've sacrificed. In verse 7, he talks about Andronicus and Junia, who were in prison with him. In verse 10, he talks about Greet Apelles, whose fidelity to Christ has stood the test. He talks about what they have done, not just who they are in a kind of a shallow sense. He talks about what they've done for the church. You know, and this might seem a little self-serving, but I am so grateful for those who serve within the church. And there are very obvious upfront capacities, but you know, even then, we know that worship comes up here and serves. You may not know how much work they put into it, how much rehearsal time they put into it, how much they figure out, how much they try, and then have to do something else and change it at the last second. You may not know how much work sound and camera put into what they do. You may not even notice them until something goes wrong, and then they get your full attention. But they are working, both during service, before service, after service, sometimes during the week, to make sure things go well for our service, for things to go seamlessly. And really quickly, I'm going to do the short version of this. I was going to do something longer, but I'll do the short version. I just want people to look at the back of the room right now, at the people at the table, and yes, I'm sorry, Doris, at Doris as well, who are serving tirelessly. Oh, hey, all right. Well, I guess I did the long version, but I'm so grateful for these people, and even the ones that aren't here in children's ministry, security out in the hall. These are people who are serving and giving, and it's not easy. You know, they miss being in service. They miss being in the fellowship. They miss, depending on what they're doing, they miss the messages. And it can be very easy to overlook that. Because again, even the people that are in this room, they're in this room, they can hear the words, but they may not be able to focus on it. They may be trying to make sure the balances are right, that the angles are right, that the internet's working. And so that is sacrifice. And so that's, that was kind of a plug for the ministries that I'm very grateful for, but even with one another, and I was going to go incognito on this one, but honestly, it's just going to be easier to name names. But Malcolm was getting a ride to the airport over this weekend. And he put in the group me asking if anyone could take him to the airport. And his flight is at 5 in the morning from Philadelphia. So there is no convenient way for that to happen. And so not one, not two, but 3 brothers volunteered to help him out in the middle of the night. And he's going to be mad at me for this, I do want to give special recognition to Alec Paquetza, I put a last-minute swerve on because I was going to take him in the very last second, like literally an hour or two before, could not take him. And so I texted Alec to see if Alec could take him. And he said yes, happily. That is service. No one made Malcolm feel like, man, like, do we have to take you? Like, can I just give you some, maybe you could just Uber down to Philly? Like, is there another way you can do, like, no one made him feel bad. People said, like, yes, what can we do? And that's what service is. That's what love is. That's what relationships create. They create moments that could be a burden, and maybe technically are, but we don't treat them as such. We treat them as like an opportunity to take care of one another because we have that relationship. It's a lot harder to do that with a total stranger. Now, maybe there are some among you that have such great hearts that like, yes, I love serving strangers. But for some of you who are maybe like me, it's much easier when like I have a relationship with you. I have some sort of stake in it where it's like, yes, like it's hard, but I'm gonna do it because you're my brother or sister in Christ. And so recognizing how much giving to one another can help, how much love that conveys. I think we underrate that, how much, we talk about two-way streets, how much love can go either way when you're serving someone. They feel that love. They show you that love. They show you that gratitude, and you feel love. And you're just like, I was just doing something. You might even be like, I didn't want to do it, but I did it anyway. But you're serving, and you loved someone. You took care of someone. One another relationships require love and service. One another relationships must be guarded against division. This feels like something that's come up quite a bit lately. I'll start in verse 17. It says, I urge you, brothers and sisters, to watch out for those who cause divisions and put obstacles in your way that are contrary to the teachings you have learned. Keep away from them. For such people are not serving our Lord Christ, but their own appetites. Everyone has heard about your obedience, so I rejoice because of you. But I want to be wise about what is good and innocent about what is evil. I know people are tired of hearing about politics, and I'm not gonna hang on it too much. But we cannot let anything divide us. We cannot put anything above our relationship with God. The effects of politics matter. I don't want to act like they don't. But it cannot be something that divides us. I cannot look at my brother and sister and say, because of what you believe outside of God, I do not have a relationship with you. We cannot do that. That is what Satan wants. That is not what God wants. Now, how that gets resolved, there are a lot of different ways that can happen. But within our own hearts, there has to be love. We have to be okay with knowing how to disagree with each other. Because if we don't just know how to disagree with each other, realistically, we're going to argue or we're going to avoid resolution. Now, I'm not saying that we should just fight, but what I'm saying is that we have to understand how to disagree and how to come to a resolution with those disagreements. And having God at the center of it is really one of the easiest ways to keep going back to the Bible, to keep going back to Jesus as our example. We see the disciples. They have disagreements with one another, and I have no idea if they had any political leanings one way or the other. I don't know how they felt about any of those kind of things, but they disagreed. But at the end of the day, God was their focus. God was their center. God was what matters most. And so they would get through those conflicts by keeping God at the center of all things. We obviously want to be mindful of, I guess just to keep it simple, of being in abusive relationships, whether it's physically or mentally. So there are exceptions for all things, but generally speaking, don't be the one to burn bridges. If someone wants to burn a bridge with you, there's only so much you can do. Don't be the one to burn that bridge. You can take a step back and say, all right, this is not a good headspace for me. This is not putting me in a good place. This is not good for my heart. But don't say, I'm done with you. Don't say, just away from me. Don't burn bridges. If people burn bridges with you, there's only so much you can do. But don't burn bridges with others. I had a lot of different ways that I was going to wrap up and talk about kind of finish up with one another relationships. I was going to talk about David and Jonathan and Ruth and Naomi. But I find one of the things I don't do often is go with very personal stories. Like, I'll tell fun stories about me, but I don't really go with personal and vulnerable a whole lot. And I wanted to talk about my relationship with Kurt. I think you guys have heard a lot about our relationship from his point of view, but I want to talk about it from my point of view. It very easily could have been a discipler-disciplee relationship. I mean, Kurt is the church leader, so it could have very easily been that. And, what probably helps a little bit is that I knew him before he was a church leader. I knew him before he was a ministry leader. My mind tends to get caught up in hierarchy a lot, even as the church doesn't anymore. That's still kind of where my mind goes a little bit. And it'd be very easy for my relationship with Kurt to be very one-sided, where he just helps me. But I'm grateful for the fact that I'm in a place where I do feel like I can help him too. Like I can, and not even just as a sounding board, although I am that too, but to actually offer input about spiritual things and about life. Like, we can goof off and we can have fun. We kind of revel in our differences. Like, as he talks about the Ironman, like, they're doing another half Ironman here in a couple months. I'm going just to hang out. There's a slight chance I'm going to be playing video games while they are swimming and biking and running. But despite those kind of differences, we have similarities. And the most important one being our relationship with God. That remains the center of all things. But it's not uneven. There may be uneven times. I may be doing better than him at times. He may be doing better than me at times. But it's not an overall uneven relationship. We help one another. It doesn't matter somebody's status. It doesn't matter somebody's age or experience. It doesn't matter how new they are. It doesn't matter how long they've been around. It doesn't matter how much they like to dig and study the Bible. It doesn't matter. You can help each other. Your life, your relationship with God, your experience could help anyone in this room at any given moment. These relationships that we build, we are not going to get to heaven without them. Someone may not get to heaven without you. We need to have one another relationships, and not just the shallow, quick, high and by hugs, praying for you, but real and genuine, spending time with each other. Even if not physically, we have so many means to connect with one another now, whether it's phone, video chats, or what have you. But to be spending time outside of Sunday service, spending time outside of midweek, having that intentional time of like, I am going to spend time with you. I'm going to sacrifice my time and my comfort for you. And you are going to do the same for me. We need these relationships. Not even just to get to heaven, but to make that journey easier, to make that journey more enjoyable. Like, there's a chance, like, God could have set up our lives where we just get to heaven and the journey just absolutely sucks. Where we just hate every day and are just sitting there like, I don't mean this flippantly, but like, I can't wait to just die. Like, I want to get to heaven. I can't handle this anymore. That could have been the life we had. But we have relationships here that can lift those burdens, that can make it so much easier, to bring joy in these times, that we can enjoy the ride. And then when we get to heaven, it's just better. It's just a better version of life. That's not going to happen without these relationships. We need one another. Build those relationships. Keep those bridges. Keep those bridges open. Invite people into your life. Open your arms and embrace. Take a chance. It can be hard. Yes, like I said, there are some that are natural relationship builders. It can be hard. but we need these one another relationships. We need them. Other people need us. You are important. I'm important. It's hard for me to say that. I'm important. You're important. We need one another. To God be the glory.